All right, everyone, we are back, all three of us, to talk about the game that happened on Friday. The New York Liberty we knew were in, and right now it's still looking like the Seattle Storm need a little bit of help if they want to get to the playoffs, but we'll talk about all of that coming up on this crossover episode of the Tempestagi Talk podcast and Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Hey, women's basketball fans, welcome to Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, brought to you by Black Rosie Media and hosted by Erica L. Ayala. Hey, everyone. Hey, Daniel. Thanks for stopping in. Erica L. Ayala here alongside Brian Florentin and Roberto Rodriguez. We know we talked about this game coming up or when it was coming up for Friday. And, I don't know. I think we saw some promise from both teams. We definitely seen what both teams have been playing like in the most recent weeks. But the impact, of course, of the result, very, very different. So Brian Florentin, of course, is my co-host of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, which this is, we're under Gotta Get Up today. Roberto Rodriguez is my co-host over at Tempestagi Talk, where we keep a local eye on the Seattle Storm. So let's start, since Brian, we're using the Gotta Get Up colors today. We'll start with you. What was your main takeaway from Friday's New York Liberty win?
So a thought I had, and I kind of wish I mentioned it on the episode Wednesday night when we last recorded. It looks like Brianna Stewart has successfully shed her minutes restriction. She was able to really impact the game the deeper it went on. She played 30 plus minutes again, and she looked really good, especially on defense. There was one sequence where she got like 2 blocks and a steal and helped push the Liberty lead up to 8. And down the stretch, they were able to get her the ball, really sort of trust her to make big plays, and combined with some timely challenges and a lot of good successful things there, they were able to sort of get back on a good foot. So I think for New York, it's a situation where if Brianna Stewart is back at close to full strength and playing to where we know that she can be, I think that solves a lot of problems that they have, especially since they're doing a lot with Emma as far as like having her hedge on pick and rolls. And sometimes there were some busts in the coverage where they didn't communicate and there was an easy layup. With Stewie on the court, she winds up erasing those errors because she's so quick to the ball. She's great help side defender. So she can really sort of solve and clean up those problems, which in turn makes Emma a lot more manageable to face, to sort of like utilize on defense, because teams have been targeting her a tremendous amount so far. So having Stewie back will really sort of help make Emma's life a lot easier on that end. And on the other side, on the offensive side, Erica, we wrote about it for the website. And
I was going to ask you, if you didn't go there yourself, I was going to ask you about it.
We'll make sure to link it again in the next edition of the newsletter. But Leonie Fibic, if Leo plays the way that she does, that solves at least 20% of the Liberty's problems. Leo, great spot up shooter, not hesitating, which I thought was critical, because sometimes Leo can overthink and make the right basketball play when the right basketball play is take that wide open shot because you got a big dog. So I love that Leo was confident. We saw her drive to the basket a good amount, like no sort of like hesitation in her game. And I feel like if Leo is playing at that level, it gives the Liberty another good offensive weapon to work with, because I think especially with the playoffs starting next weekend, teams are going to sort of dare certain shooters like a Natasha Cloud and frankly Brianna Stewart to make open jumpers from deep. And if Leo was out there, there's one less person for them to sort of like play off of. You have to account for her because she can score from deep. She can post you up. She can drive to the basket. So if Leo is able to play at a really high level, it unlocks another button for Sandy Brondello to press. And I think especially for the Liberty, since they're going to be on like 99.999% going to be starting on the road, having a good player like Leo who's confident in what she's doing will really sort of like let them ease into a series gradually without feeling as if you have to sort of like rely on Stu to get every bit of offense for you.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to ask you about Leo if you didn't bring it up yourself. Like you said, you had a great feature that we ran on blackrosymedia.com. Go check that out. We're also going to be transitioning to posting kind of recaps of our YouTube shows on our website. So if you're more of a reader or you want a summary of the shows, make sure you head over to blackrosymedia.com. You can already see some of those up, including some of the work that we do for the hockey, which includes Locked on Kraken and the Women's Hockey Report. So Craig says, yes, split screen with us and the Sparks Wings game because Hoeta with the, there you go. I knew you were locked in because this is an important thing. Indiana already locked in a spot earlier today. So Seattle, although they don't play today, they don't play till Tuesday. Yeah. If we see Indiana, or excuse me, if we see the LA Sparks lose, then that means that similarly to what happened to New York, Seattle can effectively beep, beep back into a playoff spot.
Yeah, and I specifically asked Noel Quinn about that. Now the Storm chances to head into the playoffs rely on other teams. It's not just about what the Storm is doing, it's also about what other teams are doing. And today, Los Angeles needs to lose for the Storm to finally clinch that playoff spot. Right now, we're about to end the third quarter, and LA leads 63-1. It's being a very close game. So, really, anything can happen. And it's kind of hilarious that the Storm's fate is in the Wings' hands because no one knows what the Wings can do ever. And well, Queen said that, yeah, it's, they did what they could. As a coach, she has to help her players go through these days, knowing that there is still a chance and they have to be ready for the Valkyries on Tuesday. And we know that the Valkyries is not really the easiest matchup for the Storm. So there is a lot, the Storm has a lot to lose here. And they played Friday with I would say that I saw a larger sense of urgency than I've seen in the previous games. Noelle Queen said that she thought that it was a matter of them not executing. It's one of the first of the last couple games that the Storm lost that I would say that it was a Liberty win and not a Storm loss, because the Storm actually tried. The Storm was doing everything they could, but Leo opened the bank, Brianna Stewart closed it, and there was no answer for a resemblance back of what Stewie can do, and she was not. She had that "I'm not losing this game" mentality, and it was impossible to stop her. We saw Nakagumake and Skylar Diggins step up to the plate. Amazing contributions by Dominic Malonga and Erica Wheeler. Those two players have been the key. They have been the key to the bench, and the two players who from the bench who have actually stepped up. So it was a game where we saw a Seattle Storm that can be dominant, but we also saw a New York Liberty that is the WNBA champion, and we saw, JJ, Leo, Stewie. We saw the United Nations of the Liberty over there, which is always really cool.
Yeah, and something that we talked about on the last episode. So
yeah, it was. I would say that I am not fully sad about what I saw from the Seattle Storm. Of course, that as a team they could have executed better. They needed that win, so they should have thought, with everything they had to win. But we're starting to see the New York Liberty that won the championship last year, and that is very hard to stop.
I mean, let's talk about it. Stewie 24 points, Leo 21 points. She was the only player to hit double digits before we even got to halftime. Tosh Cloud came in with 10, Kennedy Burke with 13, Mieseman with 9, JJ 2 points. And this is huge, I think, that the New York Liberty, they don't only win when Jonquel Jones has a double-double, Brian, but we know what the double-double does. It's pretty much a guarantee for the New York Liberty. But the Seattle Storm got Jones into foul trouble early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was one of those games where JJ just it's a bad whistle night, and then bad whistle compounded with frustration because there was one play early where I think it might have been Ezzy who blocked JJ over the top, and then the ball is within a foot, a few inches of JJ. She's barking at the refs, and then the Storm grab it and get on the run, and it's okay, I know that this isn't your night tonight. I understand it happens, but I need you to sort of figure it out. But she couldn't. But thankfully, Emma was really solid early on. I think that the Liberty are getting used to her as more of a pick and pop player as compared to someone who dives to the basket on those picks. So that's where you're starting to see a little bit more of the comfort. But I think also we saw some good Izzy minutes after halftime. But Kennedy Burke, I thought, really gave the team a good punch after halftime. One thing we've talked about, Erica, is that they don't get as many shots in the painted area as you'd expect for a team that's so good at it as far as percentages go. So having someone like KB consistently driving to the rim, sort of forcing the action into the paint, that matters a lot and is super valuable. And I think it gives them a really good sort of counter sort of balance when their offense gets stagnant, when you know that, hey, I have a forward who can drive downhill, who can finish in traffic, who's tough on the inside. That matters a lot. And then we saw KB take some assignments on Skylar on occasion, and as they were able to sort of toggle through various combinations. So I like for New York that even with JJ not having a good game, they were still able to sort of keep their spirits up. JJ was, even though JJ was frustrated, she was still dialed into the game. She was in good spirits. So, because sometimes we talked about it where she gets sort of frustrated and it's you lose her. Even within the fouls, I didn't feel as if JJ was sort of lost in that game, which I think is a great development for the team because it's been they won't say it, but they've been frustrated for a while, and you can sort of see the frustration sort of bubble over in Golden State when they were just sort of beating themselves up, just sort of angry that they weren't sort of doing what their mind is wanting them to do and what their execution wants them to do.
Right.
So I think for the team, just sort of being able to get back to where they need to be, even if it wasn't the cleanest game, it's okay. We didn't have our best game, but we have proof of concept that we can still do this thing. We're not completely out the woods yet. We're not down for a 10 count. We can get back up and get back to where we need to go. So I feel a game like that against a team fighting for their playoff lives really sort of sharpens what you need to do on your end to make sure that when next Sunday hits, you guys are as close to ready as possible.
Yeah, and I do think it was a step in the right direction. It wasn't as long of a stride as I would have liked, Brian, but Leo getting her work done early and being the driving force for that. If the New York Liberty can find a way to perfect having the right person or multiple people attack the game at specific spots, because Stewie can take over a game. But if we're asking her, especially coming off of injury, to start, maintain, and close a game, then we're going back to 2023, right? And there's too much talent that the team shouldn't have to be able to do that. So I thought Leo coming up was huge. I thought that Rebecca Gardner getting minutes was good. She looked a little lost out there with respect. I think she was almost over amped up, where she gave a lot of really good minutes in the Valkyries game. She looked a little out of sorts against Seattle. And I think there were times where Gardner was on the court where they were able to expose that, whether it was her bringing up the ball and things of that nature. And so you saw New York adjust in real time to that, relying more, like you already said, Brian, on Mieseman, on Stewie. I think Tosh Cloud had to really step up and take the ball over. And that's what you want from a point guard. I think, honestly, I think Tosh has to get back to what we saw in her first 5 games, with the New York Liberty, and that is relentless, sharp decision maker. And I think that she has, because of the talent, and it's not a bad thing, but I think she has given way to the flexibility and the nimbleness of the New York Liberty roster at times too much. And she needs to remind herself that she's a veteran on this squad. And I think, Roberta, that's the next step here for Seattle. We talked about this the last time the three of us were on as we were previewing Friday's game, that Sky did not talk to media. But I remember saying, for me, the reason that she didn't speak was that she was extremely emotional. And it's not the emotion of someone who's ready to rip into her teammates. I think you said it, right? She looked disappointed in herself. And you were in that press conference where she apologized to the media. She apologized to NECA, who had to carry the burden of that press conference. And I think in the press conference after the New York Liberty game, even NECA showed that there is a palpable level of frustration in this Seattle Storm locker room right now.
Yeah, it was acknowledged by both the players who were there. And of course, the questions that came to the players were, things are bad. And at the start of the press conference, they were not, who would be happy to answer those questions, right? But at some point, the thing is that we have to ask those questions. And at some point, Skylar Diggins stepped up. And I think that that's one of those moments when you see both sides of Skylar kind of like talking with themselves and coming to a resolution. I'm watching Craig. It's and Skylar said, I don't want what you all want us to say. We are frustrated and we have to do better. And she said, I have to do better. I want to apologize to all of you in the room for my behavior in the last press conference.
Yeah,
NECA took charge.
Professional kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and she said, I want to publicly apologize to NECA. She is always, picking me up and taking charge of things. So I think it was very noble of her to apologize. We can't expect people to be perfect all the time, but the level of frustration is there. And you also hear that in Noelle Queen's tone. I think for about 7, 8 home games, her tone and just like the shakiness in her voice sends a message of its own that things are not working, things are not moving, and it seems like basketball wise the team just can't move forward. They can't find a solution for wins. They can't find a solution to stay on the top. And that's what always happens. It's always the third quarter. It's always the second half, to the point where it surprises no one anymore. One thing that really caught my eyes, and I don't know if I just hadn't observed this before in the season, but after the Liberty opened, I think, a 4-point lead with those final seconds left, people started leaving. Like, people stopped believing in the arena. It was a sellout game, 12,500. People started leaving. They didn't wait till the end of the game because they knew the Storm wasn't going to pick it up. And I know that sometimes people leave games earlier, but I hadn't seen anything like that before at a Storm game where the game wasn't that far. There were, I think it was still a 2-possession game, and there were like 20 seconds or something, or 15, where there is a possibility. We know basketball, two-possession game with 15 seconds left is still concerning for the team that's winning, because something can be done. But the situation is so dire that people started leaving as if the game was over. It was like, it caught my eyes because that movement, and everyone starts to leave at the same time at a game. I saw that happen like many a times in soccer games. I saw that happen in many European games, basketball European games. I saw it in a few NBA games, and that only happens when the fan base is so frustrated with the home team. When the fans have lost faith and they're so tired that they're like, not worth it. I have to go. And that's what happened at the end of that game on Friday. Uh, I hadn't seen that at a Storm game before, and I think that feeling of frustration that the fans feel is similar to the one that the players feel, except that the players have a responsibility of winning the game, right? Fans are there to support, and we saw that from both NECA and Skylar. They really, at the start of the press conference, they I saw that. I was like, is it in my head, like, or am I making something out of it? But coming from a soccer background, and fan behavior is usually more heated than in basketball. That is something that we see quite often when people have lost faith on the team. So at the beginning of that press conference on Friday, both NECA and Skylar were very frustrated, and they knew they had to answer questions, and they were trying to be as they were being very professional, but they were still like, what do you want me to answer to this question? And then Skylar let it all out in that one. She was starting to cry a little bit. That was not the first time that we saw Skylar cry. She's an emotional. She's someone who's not afraid to show emotions. She feels a lot. And something is not working. And like I said, I feel like it's very different from how things weren't working last season. Like I said, last season, it felt like the team wasn't trying on the court. This season, it seems like they don't have the stamina. They don't have, like, they can't. They are trying to do things. They are working for it, but it's not happening.
Well, I mean, and some of that comes from direction. And I thought that, Noel Quinn was asked an interesting question. I think it was an interesting question. I think the wording maybe threw her off to an extent. I understand it, but also I think my take on it is that she was willing to feign or, lean into her confusion of it all just to get the person to say what they were really trying to say. This question, it asked, in my opinion, Noel Quinn to reflect on what she's doing or what she's observing as a coach that she then can improve upon game after game, which I think is a valid question. Sandy Brondello sometimes, Brian, will offer that. And if you ask that, like the other day, I told y'all in Slack that I wanted to find a way to ask this team, how the heck are they going to get the ball down the guts, down the middle of the court? And I asked Stewie how she impacted the game and how a game against Golden State, even though they lost, can be impacted by being physical. And then I followed up and asked Sandy Brondello, what's the balance? Because your team, made a lot of free three-pointers. And then when that well is dry, what's the balance of then being able to go downhill? So, and Sandy often will, whether she's asked or just as an example, of coaches being asked this question. I'm talking about Sandy because, well, we have a podcast that covers the New York Liberty, but also the Liberty just played Seattle. And so it's not necessarily Sandy versus Noel Quinn here. I think what I'm trying to get at is that asking a question of a coach who maybe is feeling a little bit of heat under the seat, you get a different result and a reaction perhaps from a player or a coach like Sandy Brondello, who is feeling frustrated, but I don't think reasonably, although you never know. I would be shocked, quite honestly, if the New York Liberty fired Sandy Brondello, regardless of how the season ends, comparative to where I would be shocked if Noel Quinn still has a job. Again, regardless of whatever happens with Seattle. But I want you to hear this, just because I think it talks about the frustration. Some people saw this and how Noelle Quinn reacted as her obfuscating. I feel like I always say that word wrong. I should just use a simpler word, but I like challenging myself. She maybe was deflecting a little in her response, but I'll let us be the judge and jury here, or at least have a conversation about Noelle Quinn in this particular clip we're about to show.
Personnel, have you done that? Are you able to do that? And if so, what areas of improvement have you identified?
I'm not sure how to answer this question. Are you talking about evaluating myself as a coach? Is that what you're talking about? It's not just watching film. I evaluate myself every day. In the game, whether it's, whether you're talking about rotations, play calls, all of those things. There's a lot of areas of improvement. I'll just say that.
All right, Charles, go ahead.
I feel like it's a reasonable question to ask a coach, truly, at any point in time, especially reasonable to ask a coach, hey, like, how are you? Sometimes I'll also take the heat off of a coach by just saying, how do you and the coaching staff reflect and evaluate? So, I get the sense, though, Brian, from that clip, and I'll have the outsider or more outside perspective from Brian first, and then come more close to home with Horetha. But I get the sense that Noelle Quinn, she didn't want to answer that question. I don't get the sense that she didn't completely understand it. I just get the sense that she didn't want to answer that. And I think there could be a lot of reasons that she doesn't want to answer it. Some that mirror what her players said. We're tired of talking about it. Nneka said earlier in that same press conference, if you're asking me what the difference is between a team that can win and a team that, doesn't, is that teams that win don't talk about it. So I can leave that. I can leave room for that. But to me, Brian, it just seemed like she was reading into it beyond just this game, and that maybe she didn't want to give anyone any ammo for conversations that might come at the end of the season. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's always tough, especially for a coach after they've lost the game, to sort of like have them be self-reflective about where they can be better. Because I think a lot of times, like just using Sandy as an example, should be like, oh yeah, we need to do better, myself included, but she won't be like, oh, I need to think about, she's not going to give you a detailed, oh, I'm going to look to change this rotation. I'm going to look to dial up something for this player here. You don't really get the sort of granular level thought that I think a question like that is sort of inviting. Because I think it's a great question. Like, being self-reflective is always good. Like, I appreciate whenever like coaches sort of like give us the inside perspective on what their thought process is. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think for Noe in that moment, it's a situation where you kind of sort of like try to punt as smoothly as possible, so you don't really sort of give your game away to a certain extent. So I think for her, just because she mentioned, I look in the mirror every day, it's like, okay, you're doing the self-reflection, but you don't want to share with us, which is fine. Like, you can no-sell. Like, I've had questions no-sold all the time, so I'm used to, I can be used to it to a certain extent. But I think for Noe, a moment like that is almost like a what do I think is going wrong here? And I feel like that's more, she'll sort of like get into the why of the problem more in a space that's not in front of the cameras. Because I think if you get Noe in a room with the cameras off, it's just her and like someone she trusts with the coaching staff, I think she'd give you like almost like paragraphs level of, okay, here's what I could do differently. Oh, how can I sort of like dial up more offense for Nneka? How am I able to sort of get Gabby cutting to the basket more? How can we as a team sort of get to our secondary and tertiary actions? Those kind of answers I think she can give you. But I think in a public setting, especially after another tough home loss, and as Roberta noted, the building started emptying out towards the end. So the sort of like spirit in the room for Seattle fans is getting lower and lower by the day. So I think a moment like that is where Noe's just going to sort of punt, just be like, "Oh yeah, well we look in the mirror, we try to be better," without giving you the how we're going to do it. So that way they can sort of keep it to themselves and then do like an internal accountability check for next time they're out there for the regular season finale to be like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. I don't want to say it out loud. I want to sort of like internalize the way to improve and then actually do it. And if I don't do it, that's where I have to look again at myself and figure out what I can do better, either the next time here in the postseason, the next time, next season, whatever that looks like, or wherever I land after.
Yeah, and that last piece is what I think, Hobart, that I'm interested to hear your take. And then we will get to Craig's question in a minute. I'll read it before we get into that, because I do want you to answer that as well. But I think what Brian said is accurate. And I think there's also potentially a little bit more to it, that for all of the reasons that Brian said, and perhaps because of that being a very real tension of, is she perhaps the right leader, or is the leadership overall in Seattle, as Craig is noting in his question that we'll get to in a little bit. I think there's also, my take is that because she could have punted the way Brian said, but I didn't keep all of it in there, but I think it was 2 times, and then technically a 3rd time in her response, she asked for clarification or identified that she's not really sure what kind of answer that is expected. I think the question was fair game. How do you reflect on things, etc.? I don't think it's a necessarily loaded question. I think it becomes loaded if you look at the losses piling up for Seattle, the fan base perhaps losing their patience, as has already been acknowledged. And I think that, to me, it indicated that perhaps Noelle Quinn is aware of all of those things and had that at the top of her mind before deciding how she wanted to answer that question.
Yeah, I think a very important factor here is who asked the question, and that was Cam Bufford. I actually talked to him after that and told him, hey, I really like that question. The words that he used was, he asked Noelle Quinn if she did when she watched film, if she did some self-scout, if she would look at her actions and how she called plays, and analyze that for her the same way that they analyze film for players. I think it was very well worded, and I think it was put out in a very smart way. What I know is that Noelle Quinn is a very self-reflective person. So I am 100% sure that she knows exactly what she wanted to answer to that question, but she might not have been ready to do that publicly. That's my assessment. And looking back at all of the press conferences that we had, looking back media day, she is always very self-critical, and she always points out the ways that she can improve, but the situation now is very different. And that I've been meaning to ask her, going back to that media day when she said she's on borrowed time, I wanted to ask her, how much more borrowed time do you think you have? But I know that was just like not the moment for it. And I think that the way that Cam asked it was very pertinent. I think that it was the right time because the team's about to go into their last home game and their last chance to seal their own fate.
Correct.
So
and that would be regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right now, well, actually, game over. So the Sparks did defeat Dallas, so Seattle has to win. Seattle has to win Tuesday. And so it's an interesting question. I thought it was worded really well, swung over. I think that's funny. I'm a former journalist, not sports, and I'm always so impressed at how carefully worded the questions are in the Liberty pressers. I assume there's a very specific etiquette for sports journalists. Unfortunately, swung over, I would disagree. I don't think there's a very specific etiquette for sports journalists. I've been a part of the Liberty media for, 10 seasons now in one way or another. Not there in the flesh as much as I'd like to be these days. And what I can say, just as an observation of someone who's now moved more to a national reporting role, New York Liberty beat has not changed very much in the 10 years that I have, that I've been there. And what I mean is that in Seattle, I think, Roberta, if we exclude you, if you were to go back, if we exclude you just for a moment, take yourself out of the equation. I wonder if you and I will come up with the same number roughly between, or within the last 10 years, right? So we're going back to, let's say, 2015. So right as Stewie's about to come, because she arrives in 2016. I would say that Seattle sports media has grown, and Seattle Storm sports media. So Percy, we know, is always there. Storm Chasers, right there. Mm-hmm. Again, taking you away.
Kevin Pelton.
He's national, but yes, keeps it
but he's
high,
also,
if you will, right. So other than that, I wouldn't say that your media core has doubled or even tripled. It's pretty much those same core people and maybe a handful here or there that at any given year will rotate in and out. So you'll have maybe like 6 dedicated reporters.
They're circling Seattle sports and the
right, but they didn't. But again, it's a rotation of maybe 3 or 4 others, but it's really kind of 3 key people that.
Yes.
In New York, that 3 is closer to 5 or 7, and sometimes those people, they rotate outlets, but they maintain coverage of New York. So in New York, it is not this Brian, but there's another Brian who's actually, I believe, still the New York Liberty, like the voter for the New York Liberty media. Then you have Howard and his crew, whatever they are under right now. It's the next. Jackie came within that 10 years, probably closer to 17, 18, if I remember correctly. Same time, around the time Jeff came in, and then after Jeff came, I think Miles came in first, like year around the COVID years, Miles and Owen, and then Lucas came after that. So the media core that we see now is solid and has been there for several years, Brian, yourself included, but the core has maintained and grown. It's not people really coming in and out, except for people like myself who are now national writers. And national writers obviously come in and out of the New York market. Oh, I didn't even mention Doug Feinberg, who of course does a lot of his work. Amazing. But all of that to say that my observation is that there is definitely a collaborative approach to New York scrums that is definitely understood if you've been there more than once. And that's quickly realized. Now, the New York Liberty winning, that's been disrupted a little. And some of us who've been there a while and then have people who aren't usually there are like, oh no, that's not how we do it here. But for the most part, the other Brian, who works with the team, he's really good at always getting people that he knows are around the team to engage. So I just wanted to respond to Swung Over because I think it's really interesting. I wish there was more of an etiquette. And I will say New York has curated, and I don't know, like, we don't have a meeting. We've never had a meeting, Brian, to talk about it. We just really respect each other's work, and it shows in how we ask questions. That's my take on it.
Yeah, just one quick thought to Swung Over's comment. I think what happens, like for me, like what I do is that I never walk in with like a set question. I'm always let them just sort of like vibe with the room because I know this is gonna sound. I remember one time I was reading a YouTube comment on the Liberty Presser in 2023 after they beat the Sun in Game 4, and somebody commented, how come nobody asked Benasha any questions? And I was in the room and I didn't think to ask Benasha a question. So I was like, damn, you're right. I should have like we were all there and we asked everyone else questions, but B got like a quick small one. So I'm always like, okay, let me sort of like see how the room is. Let me sort of like adjust accordingly. So if someone's asking if one player gets the majority of the questions, oh, let me get this other person some shine since they're up there. Like players don't want to talk to us if they can help it. It's like, oh hey, I could go home. Great, let me leave. So I'm like, let me sort of like ask someone who may not have gotten an opportunity a question, or just sort of like ask a different thing that may come to mind. Because sometimes, like if I have like I may have a question in mind, I'm like, oh, this adjustment on insert player here. As if someone gets to that before me, I'm like, all right, let me sort of like flip it and ask something else. Because like during games, like I take ton of notes. Like I'm always like jotting stuff down in my notebooks. I'm like, let me write stuff down. Let me just sort of like make my observations, and then I sort of like go off it that way. The scrums after that aren't in the sort of like the big media room are a little bit more chaotic because it's almost like the person is here and then it's like the whole world is in your hands with a big old microphone right there next to you. So it's a little bit more challenging in that way. But I think for us, I think speaking broadly, we all try to sort of like hit various beats because sometimes folks, Erica, you know it well, like folks may come in for like a particular assignment. And sometimes you have folks who are coming from overseas. Like there was one instance a while back where a reporter from France came in to do something on Marine Johannes, and they were able to get something in the post-game scrum. Sometimes German press comes in for Leo. And one reporter from the Bahamas, Sasha, she joins us on Zoom all the time, and she usually just asks JJ questions, but sometimes she'll throw a curveball, ask someone else a question, but it's about, oh, tell me about how great JJ.
So it's about JJ, yeah.
Yeah, which I love personally. So all of us are sort of like, it's not like oh hey, you ask this, you ask this, you ask this. It's almost like we're locked in, and
yeah,
sort of
and
like
I think that we listen to each other for the most part. Now, sometimes again it varies, and everyone works for outlets that are drastically different, which is what I also love about the New York media. And sometimes just the nature of the beast. Like if I'm doing something with CBS, for example, it's going to be very different in how I ask a question, and honestly when I ask a question versus when I would ask for Black Rosie Media, where because we are here week after week, Brian covering the New York Liberty or Hoeda covering the Seattle Storm, there are different nuanced questions that we can ask. So anyway, swung over. As you can tell, I really like that question, so thank you. I do want to come back to something that Craig posed for you, Hoeda, and it goes to something that we talked about a lot even before this season even started.
Yeah.
And here's the question. And Brian, I might punt this over to you and remix it a little from the Liberty perspective, but Craig asks, how much accountability and analysis happens in the Storm front office? Does ownership just think everything is hunky-dory? Now that's interesting because we haven't really heard from Storm executives very often, Hoeda, throughout the season, at least not, in fixed, what I'll call a fixed press conference that we know we're going to get the Zoom links and stuff like that. But what has it been being on the beat? Because I know, for example, in New York, every once in a while, Jonathan Kolb, the GM, will pop in. But I don't know if that is the same in Seattle. It seems like there's a fewer chances for all of the media to talk with front office execs.
No, and I've personally made media requests to talk to one of the executives, either the president or one of the owners, and the answer is always no. They're not going to give any press conferences, any interviews, unless it's for very specific positive stories. So like to talk about the practice facility, or if it's to talk about, positive things about the coach. So I think they did not make any of the executives available in a press conference, scrum set up, and in the Sue Bird press conference specifically, they wrote a note that said owners and executives are not going to be available for interview. So that's one of the things that I have been like, that I haven't really enjoyed on the communication side. It hasn't been a very it has been very tight. There hasn't been a lot of freedom to ask things. There hasn't been a lot of freedom in the press conferences. There's a lot of control by the communications team, whereas in most of the places that I go, including press conferences by the WNBA, they let us make our questions and pass the microphone around. I haven't felt this here in Seattle, and I know for a fact that there have been several complaints to the league and to the Storm leadership about how that communication has been held. That being said, Craig's question, it made me laugh because I also do have experience working at the Seattle Storm front office, and I know that leadership personally. There are things that I can't say, I think, because of the nature of employment and all that. What I can and will say is that Seattle is led as a Seattle company. For those of you who are listening and are from Seattle, you know that passive aggressiveness and just not a direct approach to things, confrontation, is not really in the nature of Seattleites. And that was my experience working there, and that has been my experience with the team and people in the team when I was outside of it. I don't know today what ownership thinks about the current situation. What I am going to say is that I am not going to be surprised at all if Noel Quinn is not fired. I'm not going to be surprised at all. And oh my God, this next comment by Craig, that the league is clearly maturing and professionalizing the current area, leaving the mom and pop days behind. And that's the exact feeling that I have with the Seattle Storm ownership and how things go. There has been like some knowledge for those of us who have been covering the league for a while that when some owners were against flying charter, some members of the Seattle Storm ownership were in that group that was against the charters. So it's a, they need to understand that the WNBA is in a new step, is in a new level, and there has to be more of a, it still feels like a family run business that wants to be feel good, that wants to be look good, but they can't really take accountability and responsibility. So and I think that comes with one, Seattle, the city of Seattle culture in general, that, like I said, is very passive aggressive. You don't really get into confrontation. You will tell people things by not telling them things. And the other thing is that the Seattle Storm has had a very good history with the past championships, and they were all rooted in player accomplishment. So I think that today the Seattle Storm gets away with a lot because of their history, and they're kind of like living in the past. I make a comparison with my hometown soccer team in Brazil, Santos. Santos was Pelé's team. Santos was the team where Neymar came from. And right now, the team is in crumbles because the team does really bad, but they have that golden history. Like, oh, but look at all that we did. We were the first team to come up with the plan for a practice facility. Yes, but your practice facility now when you look at Vegas, the one that New York's building, the one that other teams are building, it's a much smaller facility. It's, it's there is a need to catch up with times. And as Greg said, as a Seattle native, I'm afraid you're right. Those of us who are not from Seattle, especially those of us who were born in Latin America and their first years of American experience was in New York, navigating the Seattle experience is a struggle, and understanding how they work is really annoying. And you see that in the businesses. So the Seattle Storm needs to be a little more, they need to make tougher decisions, and they need to be a little more, they need to understand that where the WNBA is now, they need to catch up.
I mean, Seattle's not the only team. Hello, insert Chicago into the chat.
It's bad to be put in the same place. If you're
Dallas,
being put in the same place as Chicago.
What are you doing? I think Indiana tried the easy bake way to a championship, and everyone, including an assistant coach, ended up with a season-ending injury. Which is wild. Like,
it's crazy. It's absolutely
insane. I'm not even joking. Like, no. I don't even say that as a joke. That's real. That's me reporting. That's not me throwing shade. Like, literally one of their assistant coaches has a season-ending injury, which is why on CBS Sports HQ, I've been like, do we need to maybe look into the Seattle training program, or excuse me, the Indiana training program, because y'all can't even keep your coaches on the court. That's crazy. That's wild to me. But anyway, when it comes to Seattle and Craig's question also of, can this team make hard decisions? I don't know, because the team, I think, and the franchise was tasked with some difficult decisions. I think they moved on from Jewel Lloyd probably as amicably as could be expected, given some of the reporting. We never really got the full explanation, at least from the organization, nor did I think we were going to. But I don't know that the moves that they made pointed to me in a situation where there was a definitive direction. And Craig says, the Mariners say hi. I'm over here shaking as someone who has to now cover content on the Seattle Kraken 5 days a week over on Locked On Kraken, because they have the same issue over there. So maybe there is something to what you're saying about just kind of Seattle nice or whatever, but which I know sometimes comes off in a different way. But I think that this Seattle team has to decide. You can't rest on your laurels. Yes, you're one of 3 franchises with 4 championships overall, but I tell you what, Minnesota's knocking on the door to get number 5. If Houston gets a team back, which it sounds like, yeah, there you go. Brian's like, what's the other one? If Houston gets a team back, which it sounds like the league wants them to, I don't really know how that works. Personally, as a Cheryl Swoops fan growing up, therefore a Comets fan when I wasn't rooting for the Liberty, Houston, y'all ain't get none of that. Y'all ain't get none of that because y'all ain't keep the Comets. So you forfeited your extended rights to those championships. That's how I feel. I know some people don't feel that way, but y'all know how I am. Ask me if I think if Houston gets a team, if they should be called the Comets. Absolutely not. Because unless out the gate you're winning 4 titles and then an extra one just for good measure, don't you dare call yourself the Comets. But that's just how I feel. Anyway, let's bring this back to what needs to happen, Hoeta, because with the Sparks winning, and honestly, like you could spin this a lot of different ways. Some people will write about what quote unquote deserves to happen. Some people will write about what we expect to happen. And then of course there is what actually will happen. And we won't know that until Seattle hits the court again against a very scrappy Golden State Valkyries team that has already made history, being the first expansion team to make the postseason in their inaugural season. Not to mention, as Brian and I know all too well, they kind of feeling themselves after finally getting over the hump that is the New York Liberty. So what is on the line here, Hoeta, for this team? And do they have what it takes to find a way, as Malcolm X would say, to win by any means necessary?
They do. They do have what it takes to win by any means necessary. They beat Minnesota. They beat New York. They almost beat New York on Friday, but like I said, it was more about that was more a New York win than Seattle loss. Like you mentioned on Friday on the podcast. Was it Friday? And this week passed by so fast. I think it was Wednesday. The
Thursday. We spoke Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, the New York Liberty needed that statement win. It was very important, and the New York Liberty was better at achieving what they needed. So I do think the Seattle Storm has what it takes to win that game and move on to the playoffs. Los Angeles is going to be playing with Phoenix against Phoenix at the same time. So this WNBA schedule was made for us to suffer.
Phoenix just lost to Connecticut.
And Connecticut celebrated as if they had won the championship. So yes, the New York, Seattle does have
was that their last home game? So it might have been. I don't know.
They have a game today, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, honestly, when all you can do is play spoiler, why not live your life?
Yeah. So I do think Seattle has what it takes. They have, and I'm gonna say another Brazilian. I realize that I have to bring more Brazilian expressions here. We say, elas têm a faca e o queijo na mão. They have the knife and the cheese in the hand. They have what they need to make that sandwich, because we cut cheese a lot of our, like, we cut cheese a lot. It's amazing. It's fresh cheese. I love it. So they have the knife and the cheese in the hand, and they can win. They can win that game. The chances are of the Storm making the playoffs more than them not making the playoffs. Sometimes you don't need a little help from your friends. Like, you don't get a little help from your friends. Just do it yourself. Yeah, and this is not the time to beat
not
those
enough
out.
Nike athletes on Seattle is what you're saying.
Yeah. So
Puma, Jordan, Adidas folks.
So
yeah,
I
think it's an interesting position because yes, we know they can do it. I think it goes back to some of the questions though that Craig is asking that are already impacting the team now, but will definitely impact them down the road. Noe is knowledgeable, but who is the big picture basketball thinker on this squad? I think Pokey is probably is the most well-versed when it comes to basketball across all levels. And, has Pokey been empowered to really be a part of these conversations? We know that she has like multiple different titles with Seattle, right? And is it better to just maybe give it to her outright? I don't know. But I do think that there is some positioning that Seattle has to do that they haven't been able to do with how they've built their roster and how they're performing on the court. But it is going to be extremely difficult for LA to win out. Not impossible, because LA is scrappy. And I'm going to be honest, it's one game, one night. To get in for Seattle, I'm not even thinking about the opponent. I'm thinking about how LA, to me, they know they don't always have all of the pieces. They might be out of step every once in a while. They're dancing on the 1 and the 3 every once in a while instead of the 2 and the 4. But they also, find a way. They find a way to find that beat. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Seattle doesn't always. I agree with you that they have what it takes, but they haven't always shown us that they can close out, whereas the Sparks have. I mean, we've seen them blow leads and we've seen them cut into massive leads.
Especially against the Storm.
Well, listen, I
know. Yeah, you're like, I'm not going to say it. I'll say
it. But I think it's an interesting proposition. There was a lot of emotion from NECA, a lot of emotion from Sky on Friday. But what does that mean? And this is, Brian, something that we've been talking about with New York. New York is in a very different position. The desperation, at least, shouldn't be as heightened. If you're a neutral party watching, I think you can admit that the Seattle Storm situation a lot more vulnerable than obviously New York, who has already clinched their spot, and their position gets sensitive when you start talking about them as the defending champions coming into the postseason, and the fact that they've underperformed given what the potential of their, might I add, healthy roster is. So Brian, does it have to be all or nothing for the Liberty to close this out, or have we seen enough improvements even in how they played the Valkyries to Seattle for this team to have some confidence going into the postseason where the games matter a lot more?
I think I would be confident in the group if I see Sabrina and Niara play Tuesday night. I think if they're back, at the very least, they get a game to sort of like iron some things out and make sure that they're going to be good to go come Sunday afternoon in insert city here. I think if we leave the regular season Thursday night with questions about is Sab healthy enough, is her toe good, is her ankle good, I think that makes their task in the first round a lot more challenging. And I don't think that they'd be able to, I think, really win a first round series if Sab isn't there. Because I think, for a lot of the great talent on the team, Erica, you mentioned it a lot. It's almost like a cake where, like, if you take one ingredient out, the entire sort of final product is going to be bonked up. So I think not having Sab there really sort of like makes their task a lot more difficult. And I don't think, despite the great talent on the team, despite the togetherness and all that they have, if they're missing a key piece, and especially a ball handler who can run things when Tosh Cloud sits, someone that you have to respect as a shooter, even if the percentages don't sort of like match the eye test and the sort of perceived reality of it. Not having that is going to be so damaging and daunting for this team. And especially considering you have opponents who have been locked in on you for a while and know what you're doing and have seen you within the past month and change, it makes for a more challenging assignment. And I have a high level of doubt that they can start on the road, bring it back here, and then if all else fails, go into a game 3 on the road without being at your full strength and being able to sort of advance into the next round and presumably another way more challenging matchup awaiting them.
Yeah, and also sorry to our IG folks. I'm just your comments weren't popping up on our StreamYard for some reason, but appreciate y'all who are watching over on IG. Miss y'all. But I think you're right. And yes, I do use my baking analogy a lot. And you're kind of talking about trying to bake a cake and maybe you don't have sprinkles, right? Or you don't have the right icing. You can still have a cake, but you mess around with no eggs. You mess around with no oven. What you cooking? What you cooking? You ain't cooking nothing. That's really interesting. And so someone also asked about Niara, and her timeline, Brian, continues to get pushed back. I think Sabrina probably, or at least they're keeping it close to the chest. And we're making the assumption that she'll be ready, and that's the goal. With Niara, I don't know. Her timeline has been pushed back multiple times on the hush here on the sneak. Those of us who, again, cover the team more regularly is kind of like, all right, well, I thought you said the 18th. Oh, no, that was just an evaluation. Okay, but now it's past August 18th. So where are we at now? We about to be double digits in September and still haven't gotten no update. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of wild. And I do think Niara is a huge piece. I already talked about international players, and you could give that championship right back if you don't want international players in the WNBA, because that's who won that for the New York Liberty. But let's, I think, Roberta, if we stick to our regular schedule for Tempestagi Talk, we will have a chance to speak after whatever happens on Tuesday. So before we have you go, and Brian will then circle back to, again, this team can be successful in the first round if, I think you kind of answered that, but I just want to end on that. that as well. But Roberta, so we'll come to you. What do you need to see from Seattle on Tuesday in order for them to put themselves in a position to win out and, again, take matters into their own hands?
Aggressiveness and focus. The team needs to remain aggressive and stay focused and not slow down. They need to keep that volume in the max the whole game, and they need to play Dominic Malonga. They need to play her. There were points in the last game that it did not make sense not to have Dominic Malonga on the court. Dominic and Erica Wheeler did play a little more, I think, but Dominic and that run, the 17-something run that the Storm had, it was led by Dominic and Erica Wheeler. So they need to be playing, and Noelle Quinn needs to be brave. She needs to make tough decisions. She needs to put those players there.
Huge.
That's what this team needs, to not be afraid. They are their own enemy. That's what it is.
Go get after it. I mean, that's literally your backs are up against the wall. And I know, again, we've talked about it here before. A lot of people will say a lot of things about Sky. I'll tell you what, Sky Slim with a little bit of Gabby Williams and Dominique Malunga to smooth it all out. That sounds good to me. And then that way, Nneka becomes your finesse player. Like, what? You don't need her to pound in the paint. She's not taking all of, or not most of, the physicality, because then the other teams have to deal with everybody else. I think you need to find a way, and you don't usually think in this way, but you need to find a way to kind of protect Nneka almost as you would a shooting guard on literally any other team.
Yeah. If I can say one, again, like we said about the teams, if any player is watching, if anyone has access to the team, now this time, if you're that person, I have a message for Noelle Quinn.
Oh,
tell Noelle Quinn to just set the place on fire.
Set it off.
It's the last game of the season. Start Dominic Malonga.
Set it off. Chaos.
Start Dominic Malonga. Just
what's the worst that can happen? You take her out and put her on the bench?
Like, it's the last game of the season. Go crazy. Like, don't hold anything back. Do whatever the F you want. Get 2 technicals. Be ejected. That's your chance. Go crazy, Noelle Quinn. We're here to see Noelle Quinn just like, yeah,
go off. So we need her wearing her Timbers.
Listen, it's against we need her in all lavender. We need her in all lavender with some touches of black, and
Black Tims would go hard. Black Tims.
Black Tims and a lavender suit.
Black Tims.
It's giving Paige Beckers, but I could see Noelle Quinn rock that.
I love it. Well, Roberta, again, we will be back with our regularly scheduled Wednesday, because that will be the day after we see whether Noe showed up in her lavender and black or not.
And we're gonna be talking either. It's gonna be either like, okay, let's preview the Storm playoffs, or it's gonna be, let's see when the exit interview is.
Right, exactly. And I will be, or not. Well, if they lose, I will miss exit interviews.
Yeah.
Because I'll be in Seattle Saturday.
Okay.
So yeah, let's see. I guess we'll find out. I was in Seattle for exit interviews last year.
Yeah, you were.
We'll see what happens. Okay, Brian, to close out, we're officially hosting this crossover at Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. So we got to give the Liberty fans something to hang on to. Teams in the playoffs. We know that Washington. We got Washington on Tuesday, not a sleeper team, but also not a team that's no team can hurt their playoff chances at this point in time. But what do you need to see from New York against that Mystic squad? What will prove that they are feeling good and confident going into the postseason?
I think for Tuesday, what I want to see is them win the rebound battle by at least 8. Because Washington, Kiki has been bodying people all season long, and she's been excellent, and she's a force on the glass. But I think for the Liberty, if they're able to sort of play with size, really sort of be able to control the painted area, I really like that. I like their chances going forward because the rebounding has been such a bugaboo all season, and they defended the initial actions. They defend for the first 24, but then all of a sudden, second chance, third chance, fourth chance, and then what happens eventually? There's a hole in the boat somewhere, and then it's 3 points going the other way. So if they're able to really control the glass, limit the second chance opportunities for Kiki and Washington, I think is a good sign that they're starting to get where they need to be for the postseason. And I think within that also, yeah, just the rebound margin is the big thing. I also want to sort of see what happens when Stewie sits, because in the game on Friday night when Stewie sat down, that's when Seattle sort of started to run wild a little bit in the second quarter.
Yeah.
And we're gonna see when the playoffs start, her minutes are gonna go sky high, which is to be expected. But I think even within that, you want to be able to survive when she sits down for a couple minutes, because like if she's happened to go 39-40 in the first round, it means we're in the Liberty are in big trouble. So I want to see what it looks like when the second unit is in the game, how they're able to sort of like navigate when she sits down, JJ staying out of foul trouble, her continued sort of like finding the rhythm with Emma as far as like defending pick and roll coverages, how they're able to sort of like rotate on the backside, especially when Emma is out in space. Like I want to see what it looks like when a cutter slips by. Is the sort of like roll help coming down? Is it going to be a situation where it's like, oh, Tosh Cloud has to rotate down to handle that rolling big? Can it be a JJ? What are the coverages going to look like for New York, and what the sort of defensive idea is? And another thing that's also important, and it's a little bit more subtle, is their level of communication.
100%.
Yeah, a friend of ours, Maddie Kenny, had a story in the Post a few days ago where Tosh Cloud was like, "We don't effing communicate," and Liberty fans were like, "Oh, this is what look at what the coaching staff is doing," and I'm like, that's not really like. These are all good defenders, and they've all played basketball for decades now. They know when you're on the court, open your mouth, like talk, like. It's a lot of building, but use your voice and sort of speak to what you're doing. Yeah, I want to see.
I've been saying that for weeks, Brian.
Yeah.
For weeks.
Yeah, we've all called it out, and the players know it. So it's sort of similar to how we were talking about the sort of like self-reflection piece earlier with Noe. They've externally vocalized the thing they need to get better at. Now it's I want to see you put it to action.
Exactly.
Yeah, like you can talk that, oh, I want to do this, but when you're in the position to really sort of like get that ironed out, and I think this group can, because they're all very cerebral, heady basketball players with a lot of game and a lot of knowledge. If they're able to start communicating and sort of like making sure that their rotations are crisp, I like what they're going to do, because when the playoffs start, you're going to see teams that fly all over the court. They're getting into the secondary, third actions. Like the breakdowns are going to come eventually. And if you're able to sort of talk it out now and get that down pat, I like how they're going to be able to defend these elite postseason offenses starting on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, 100% have to open their mouth. So we'll see. We'll see how things turn out. Uphill climb. It's just an immediate sprint right now for Seattle, where there's some time, but honestly, not a lot of time. There's going to be a lot of learning on the fly. And I wouldn't be surprised if New York takes a gamble or two with their starting rotation to then make sure that their second unit is as strong. That's kind of a prediction I have. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I think Sandy Brondello is going to have to put her versatility and depth to the test again by just shaking up that starting rotation a little bit more, so to help boost what comes off the bench. And I don't think it necessarily has to be scoring alone. I think it just needs to be a clear-cut leader, a vocal leader, to your point. So we'll see what happens there. But okay, for Hobet Rodriguez, who you will see on Black Rose Media once again on Wednesday, for Brian F. Fullerton, who this is your assignments are done on YouTube. You're welcome to join us Wednesday if you want, homie, but you are done. But we've got you twice this week for the newsletter. the women's basketball roundup. If you are not subscribed, please do so. And if you are an Angel Reese fan, or if you are a 2K26 fan, or especially if you are both, you're going to want to read the newsletter, because we're going to be doing a little giveaway campaign. And so folks in our Slack channel will hear about it first, and then you'll be hearing about it in the newsletter. Your chance to win one of those Angel Reese shirts that they gave away earlier this season. But again, my name is Erica L. Ayala, your founder of I just saw this from Swung Over, rotation number 753. Listen, at this point, you got to go for it. I'm so serious. I really think she's going to have to, it probably just one player, but I think she has to equalize the two main teams here, so to speak. I love Sandy No Notes. So do I, Swung Over. Big fan. But we will be back Wednesday, more so to focus on the Seattle Storm, because we will know whether they're in the playoffs or not. And either way, it has the potential to be a very long offseason for Seattle. New York, they've got some healing to do. So send your good vibes. I mean, they got to pull all the strings for every recovery, promotion and partnership that they can think of to get. They've got knees, toes, hips. I don't even know what noses, elbows, shoulders. Like, ain't nobody got a full body, which is wild. They just gotta sew them together like it's a character from A Nightmare Before Christmas and hope for the best.
Yeah. And that is if we have a league next season.
Oh my gosh. No, she didn't. First of all, I love how Brian in real time turned into the melting emoji. He's just now we know the inspiration. Brian was just slow melt. Oh, that will be our off season as well. All three of us talking about, will we have a CBA? And the Players Association has been doing their rounds again, most recently on Bloomberg.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. But I also know Brian has something cooking up for the most recent Naismith Hall of Famers, one of which quite literally has a statue in Seattle. So all of that you can expect over at Black Rosie Media. Please do subscribe, like this video, follow us. We have our good friend Joe helping us with some things on social media, and subscribe to the newsletter, because again, we got some giveaways. We want you to continue to help us spread the word. And thank you. Good podcast. We want to keep putting it on for you. Again, you can also head to blackrosiemedia.com, where we'll start to have written summaries of all of our podcasts, which include our hockey coverage at Locked on Kraken and the Women's Hockey Report. But again, for Brian Florentin, who's going to wave, and Roberta Rodriguez, who will now wave, my name is Erica L. Ayala. We are your hosts here covering women's basketball at Black Rosie Media, and we will catch you on the next one. But because this is Gotta Get Up, we got to end Brian on the wave.
I'll do it too. I'll do it because I want to be part of them.
All right, everyone's gonna Ellie wave. Ellie wave, everyone. Damien says, all right. Damien says Seattle can make the playoffs. I love positivity from Damien.
Yeah.
I love
Woohoo,
it. I love it. Woohoo, liberty, bibberty. Let's go. We'll see. We'll be back Wednesday. We're definitely going to talk about Seattle, probably a little New York too. But all right, Ellie wave out of here for real now. We'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.